Thank you to my channel members and Ko-fi supporters that make these videos possible. You can also support me by buying a deck tech on my weekly Tuesday and Sunday streams. More info in the video description. Hello everyone. Commander has existed for a long time, long before the 2013 precons that introduced the idea of cards made specifically for Commander. It is these cards that I wanted to talk about today, because I've seen some strong, nearing boorish positions about the topic. Now, let me start by saying that it's okay to miss the format as it was before these cards were printed, to have nostalgia for something that is gone. That is very much a reasonable thing to feel. It is no secret that designing cards with Commander in mind has, in fact, changed the format. That being said, it's not correct just to take the extreme position and say that all 4 Commander cards are bad design. In fact, I'd argue that most designs for Commander are actually incredibly cool and make the format better than it would have been without them. That being said, it is hard to ignore some of the design mistakes that have come from it as well. But as always, just because there's bad with the good doesn't mean that the whole thing is bad. There's a nuanced position to be had here. I've lined up 5 examples of good and bad for Commander designs to hopefully illustrate what kinds of designs redeem this archetype of card, and also what design mistakes should be avoided in the future. My first choice for best designed for Commander cards is Seize the Spotlight. This is one of the few examples of a voting card that is done right, as having your creature stolen only affects you, and the upside of the other choice is about equivalent to what the first option is, about a card's worth of value. This card is incredible when combined with Sacrifice Outlets, and the fact that it gets around hexproof means that even Voltron players have to seriously weigh the risk of handing over their giant monster. In contrast, my first choice for one of the poorly designed Commander cards is Tempt with Discovery. Expropriate got lucky this day. It was designed for Conspiracy, not for Commander. Otherwise, it'd be here instead. Tempt with Discovery is always a good card by itself. 4 mana, tutor a land into play is actually just a fine rate, as Sowing Mycospawn for Modern Horizons 3 has proved. And this card only gets better the worse the table is at Magic. The worst part about this card is an agency problem. Even if you make the correct choice, which is almost always not taking the land, your opponents can just choose, whatever, I want a land, and you are punished for it. Conversely, looking back at Seize the Spotlight, the downside of not having your creature stolen and sacrificed is about the same as giving your opponent a card. The selfish option, as it were in this way, is less punishing and generally more fair, since to be at its most broken, it needs to be comboed with a second card, a Sacrifice Outlet. My next choice for best designs among Commander-only cards is Sower of Discord. This is an example of a perfect design that would be impossible without 4 Commander cards, as this card is just stone cold unplayable in a 1v1, but hilarious in a multiplayer setting. Not only for incentivizing combat, but just being downright silly with cards like Perforos or Ascend from Avernus that hit opponents equally. Saskia the Unyielding is a similarly great design in this regard for encouraging combat and melting life totals, but going about it in a totally fair way. That is unlike this next card, Akroma's Will. Now listen, Akroma's Will is far from being a powerhouse like its sister Jeska's Will. It's just kind of underwhelming though to have a card that is effectively a kill button that is designed for Commander. It feels too easy to include. Now, no shame if your deck runs Akroma's Will as a finisher and you don't have a better option. Every deck should have a way to close out the game in my opinion, even if it's not the most flashy effect. It's just that in my mind, the more designs like this, the worse off we are, as it makes combat less interesting to have parity breakers this powerful, since chip damage just becomes irrelevant, causing the game to devolve into make a bigger board and pass, make a bigger board and pass. If you asked me about a year or so ago what my favorite Magic card was, I'd probably tell you Vindictive Lich. The hilarity this card brings to a board state is quite palpable already, as people will simply not attack you out of fear of popping the Lich, since each mode he has is generally enough to mess up at least one opponent pretty badly, whether that's an aggressive player sitting with a few cards in hand or someone that is all in on one creature. The thing about this triggered ability though is that it can easily be doubled with cards like Harmonic Prodigy or death trigger doublers like Teysa and Drivnod. Suddenly, this thing is a nuclear bomb, dealing 10 life loss to someone, making someone discard 4, and making someone sacrifice 2, which is a huge card advantage swing. Also, this card has a fun ruling, and who doesn't like those? Overall, just a very fun and actually somewhat decent card. If you want to look at a card that does scaling with opponents in perhaps the most egregious way possible, Dockside Extortionist was up there. This being said, I'll leave it as an honorable mention since it's now banned, and instead I'll talk about Eminence. Eminence commanders have an ability that triggers while they aren't in play. All of these cards, including the newest one, Sadar Jabari of Zalfir, I consider design mistakes. You see, all of these cards effectively give you free value that is practically uncounterable. This being said, cats are weak enough and a free offensive giant growth is weak enough as well that I do have a small soft spot for Arabo, especially since he gets combat going. But that being said, I'd happily trade him in exchange for all the other Eminence commanders never getting made. Sorry to ruin the good, bad flow that I have going here, but I just can't not talk about it. Teferi's Protection is one messed up magic card. There is next to nothing that this card doesn't utterly hose. Board wipe, lethal swing, curses attached to you, mass land destruction, infinite turns. It's funny that only the worst archetype in Commander, Mill, can reasonably answer a player through Teferi's Protection. The worst part about this to me, though, is that it feels required to run in my board-based decks, despite how much I hate the card's design, because of the stupid arms race of removal and protection. I cannot beat Farewell, Toxic Deluge, or Cyclonic Rift with indestructible granters. I need phasing or mass flicker spells, and the best among them is T-Pro. It sadly feels like T-Pro is an unfortunate truth Commander players have to endure. On to a brighter note on defensive plays, I do quite enjoy Reversal Fogs, however, that being cards like Arachnogenesis, Ink Shield, Comeuppance, Take the Bait, and Selfless Squire. What I like about these cards is that they give solid counterplay to the previously mentioned terrible play pattern of build board, Alpha Strike. It's super cathartic to blow out an opponent's Crater Hoof turn with one of these cards designs. Like, these return death by chip damage games to a thing that can happen in reality, since ink shielding a 6 power or so attacker isn't quite as splashy as catching one of those Alpha Strikes is. It is now time we move on to the worst designed cards, in my opinion, and those are the Ikoria free spells. The philosophy behind these designs, from what I recall, is that they augment your commander, but it does so in a way that feels incredibly unfair because of how horribly telegraphed they are. They sit in your hand and become active after taking one of the most basic game actions in Commander, deploying the commander. This is a criticism, or at least a joke, I hear often leveled at landfall as a mechanic. Playing lands is just such a basic part of the game that being rewarded for it just feels silly. This is the same idea here. They are far too free and easy to include, with the red and blue ones especially being the most egregious. A better application of the design philosophy behind these cards is going to be my pick for the best of 4 Commander designs. Backgrounds. Backgrounds are a cycle of designs from Commander Legends Baldur's Gate. This cycle of enchantments quite literally do nothing until your commander comes into play. Then it augments them, either by giving them activated or triggered abilities or changing their stats. What I like about these is that it augments your commander in a fun way while still having a downside. Your commander getting removed is now pretty meaningful card disadvantage since it not only shuts off your commander, but your background as well. Now, backgrounds can be played as commanders alongside any commander with the choose the background mechanic, but I argue they're funniest in decks with partners, since both partners are your commander and therefore gain the benefit from the background. That's the list. Hopefully anti-commander card purists out there found one of these designs charming enough to let up on the totalitarian argument regarding 4 commander designs, and hopefully some of you can find catharsis in knowing that someone hates a card just as much as you do. While making this video, I was scrolling through the over 2,000 cards printed specifically in a Commander product for the format, and generally speaking, just about all of them are totally fine designs. It's hard to find any one besides the ones I listed in this video that I have a particularly strong feeling about. Tell me though, what are your favorite Commander designs? Least favorite? Did you agree or disagree with anything, especially in this video? Thanks for watching, and until next time, bye! Jeez, these kids are loud.